If we are now living in a state of tyranny, exactly. In a state of tyranny, suppose someone today takes over a country, or whatever it is, and says, "The people have chosen me. My name is Commander of the Faithful." It's not acceptable for anyone who commands 100, 200, 1,000, 2,000, or even 100,000 people to declare himself Caliph of the Muslims and demand allegiance from the rest of the Muslims, as happened, for example, with the Islamic State. In summary, let's take a roadmap from the period of the rightly guided caliphate. This 30-year period of the rightly guided caliphate was their golden age. The first rule they established was, whoever worshipped Muhammad, then Muhammad is dead. You can consider Abu Bakr the founder of the science of Islamic political theory. There's a natural contradiction in all three of them. If someone were to come out and ask us how we consider or classify the period of the caliphate as a golden age, the golden age for Muslims is related to humanity, not to civilization and construction. I asked this question so we know where we are today. We expect, God willing, that the next stage will be the stage of the caliphate on the model of prophethood. Peace be upon you, my brothers, wherever you are. Welcome to this series, 100 Questions in History, in which we answer pressing questions about our Islamic history. Now, where have we reached in this series? We have reached the fourth axis, the rightly guided caliphate. So, stand to the right like this and focus. If you're holding something in your hand, try to put it down. But if you don't have a pen, go get one so you can take notes with us. Why? Because, remember, we agreed that history has two major divisions, political history and cultural history. We said that political history is relatively more important than cultural history for many generations of this nation, because they are two major divisions. Almost everything we've said so far has been an introduction and a prelude. We've talked more about cultural aspects than political ones. Look at what's coming next. All the topics in this series fall under political history. Why am I saying this? Because when you start talking about political history, questions will naturally arise. If you don't have any background on the subject from the beginning, even more questions will arise. So, when we're discussing the caliphate, if you don't have even a basic understanding of the lives of the rightly guided caliphs and many of the events, it's like watching a film halfway through. The film skipped over many questions and answered them. So when we reached the conclusion, many questions arose. Why did we reach that conclusion? Our job in this program is to avail this and remove this confusion as much as possible. That's the first point. Secondly, when we talk about the caliphate, we naturally delve into many issues, including the events of the Fitna civil war and what happened during it. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, this is a recommendation and a request to everyone. Even in the comments, the idea of insulting or cursing the companions is a red line. We will address this issue and discuss it thoroughly, God willing. So, always use your intellect when you hear what you hear, because ultimately, these are human beings. They get it right, they get it wrong, and so on. I don't want to make this introduction any longer, but because of the importance of what we're about to discuss, I wanted to give you this brief introduction. By the way, there are hundreds and dozens of questions. We could finish this series, the 100 Questions in History series, just on this topic of the caliphate, but we only cover a dozen questions in each topic. Of course, at the beginning of the episode, we must welcome Professor Muhammad Al-Harmi, the regular guest of this series. Welcome, Professor Muhammad. May God bless you, Abu Al-Harith. May God reward you. Of course, please forgive me for making this introduction like this, but it's just to lay the groundwork and get into the first part. We're all in agreement. It's a fitting introduction. May God protect you. Okay, we've reached question number 31. Ready for question 31? We put our trust in God. Question 31. It would be helpful, Professor Muhammad, if you could give us a summary, something like a roadmap for all of us about the period of the rightly guided caliphate. What was our period of the rightly guided caliphate is to provide us with guidance before we delve into the remaining questions, God willing. May God bless you, sir. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Praise be to God, and peace and blessings be upon the messenger of God, his family, his companions, and those who follow him. Look, Abu al-Harith, we are now discussing the period of the rightly guided caliphate. We mentioned previously in the section on Islamic civilization that, for Muslims, this period of the rightly guided caliphate is their golden age, the golden age of Islamic civilization. It is the period of the rightly guided caliphate, even though it lacked palaces, decorations, and scientific inventions. However, it was a pinnacle where people received their rights, lived in security, felt their dignity, and were not oppressed or wronged. This is the Golden Age, and for Muslims, the Golden Age is related to humanity, not to construction and buildings. Therefore, we should consider this period of the rightly guided caliphate as the most glorious and flourishing period in our Islamic history, and certainly look and see the history of humankind, for Muslims are the best nation brought forth for mankind. This perception, which should exist and be presumed to exist, is not present now. This is a result of Orientalist, westernizing, and secularist pressures. Now, whenever you open the discussion about the lives of the rightly guided caliphs, doubts and questions arise as if this period was a bad one. On the contrary, this period is the most prosperous, flourishing, and just period in all of human history. Therefore, I mention this introduction at the beginning to draw people's attention to the fact that when we study the period of the rightly guided caliphate, we are talking about the best period in our history. Is this my opinion, or someone else's, or the opinion of Islamists? No, this is the saying of our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, because the Prophet is the one who divided the stages of history for us. The Prophet said, prophethood will remain among you as long as God wills it to remain. So, there is a period of prophethood in which the Prophet was, then he will remove it when he wills to remove it, and then there will be a rightly guided caliphate following the prophetic model. So, God meaning the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, God, peace and blessings be upon him, mentioned that this rightly guided caliphate is a caliphate based on the prophetic methodology, but without the Prophet. Then he will abolish it if he wills, and then there will be a tyrannical monarchy. A tyrannical monarchy means one who clings to power and seizes control. Then there will be an oppressive monarchy. This stage is worse than the stage of the tyrannical monarchy. The tyrannical monarchy contains a degree of mercy as described in another hadith. Then there is a monarchy and mercy, meaning there will be prophethood and mercy, then a caliphate and mercy, then a monarchy and mercy. Here we have the oppressive monarchy, which has no mercy. Then there is an oppressive monarchy, which is an era of tyranny, terror, and humiliation. Then there will be a caliphate based on the prophetic methodology. These are the periods of Islamic history, as our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, divided them. So we are now talking about the period of the rightly guided caliphate, the caliphate based on the prophetic methodology, which is the best period of Islamic history. Forgive me, Professor Muhammad, I'm overwhelmed with ideas. Take your time. I want you to interrupt me on this specific point because there are many ideas in it. I mean the hadith that you mentioned. Did scholars or historians apply this to historical periods? Yes, of course, we can apply it to historical periods now. Yes. The most likely interpretation, without reviewing all the statements, is that the prophetic era is understood, the era of the rightly guided caliphate. What is the rightly guided caliphate? Another hadith clarifies and illuminates its duration. The Prophet's peace and blessings be upon him. Famous hadith of Safina, the caliphate after me will last 30 years. he means the rightly guided caliphate following the prophetic model. We find that the prophet died in Rabi al-Awwal of the year 11H, and al-Hasan ibn Ali relinquished the caliphate to Muawiyah in Rabi al-Awwal of the year 41R, exactly 30 years. So, we come up with 30 years, exactly 30 years, in Rabi al-Awwal. Yes, therefore, the trying to differentiate, or rather, to explore through the hadiths what distinguishes these stages, we will find the following: prophethood, the pinnacle, ruled by the prophet, the recipient of divine revelation, connected to heaven. The rightly guided caliphate, following the prophetic model, fulfilled the two major pillars of the Islamic political system: the pillar of ruling by Sharia and the pillar of the nation's selection of the caliph. The entire nation chose the caliph. None of them inherited power, none of them conquered the people by the sword or by force. They were all chosen with the consent of the nation and all ruled by Sharia. These two major pillars are fundamental to the life of the nation and the Islamic political system. Now, the monarchy here, one pillar was present but another was absent. The rule by Sharia was present, but the pillar of the nation's selection of the ruler was absent. Here, the verse begins to address whether the caliph assumes power through inheritance or by force, not through the nation's consent. However, the rule of Sharia remains. No one rules by Napoleon's law, neither Genghis Khan's law nor Alexander's law, nor the existing rule is the rule of the verse, the rule of Sharia. This is what prevailed during the Umayyad, Abbasid, and Ottoman periods. Oppressive rule. This was after the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate, or after the Ottoman Caliphate disappeared from some areas. Here, the two pillars fell, the two pillars collapsed. There was no longer rule by Sharia, nor did the nation choose its leader. Kings ruled us by force, by coercion, by inheritance, and there was no rule by Sharia. This is what an era of humiliation, terror, and great oppression this is. This period is described in the prophetic hadiths with terrifying descriptions, such as the hadith saying, "They will fight over it like donkeys fight over a plant," meaning they will compete to uproot it. The fighting of donkeys is like when, during a drought, a donkey comes and pulls the plant out by its roots because there is no food. So, it is as if the fighting over power and rule and the violence involved is like the fighting of donkeys over a plant, and on the origin of the plant, and in the other hadith, which is also the hadith of Hudayfar, which corresponds to this division, which is, "O Messenger of God, we were in ignorance and evil, so after this, and then we came to what God bestowed upon us of good. So after this good is there evil?" He said, "Yes." He said, "And after this evil is there good?" He said, "Yes, and it is mixed." He said, "And after this good is there evil?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "Describe them to us, O Messenger of God." He said, "People from our own people, speaking our language. Their hearts are the hearts of devils in the bodies of men. O God, they stand at the gates of hell. Whoever answers their call, they throw him into it." So when you talk about the correspondence of this hadith with the rest of the hadiths, then this period is the period of the verse, which means the ruling systems and the nature of the rule and what it contains of coercion, terror, oppression, and humiliation in this manner, even though they are from our own people and speak our language, meaning it is not an external occupation or foreign control. So, therefore, this period is the period after the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate, which is the end of the Islamic Caliphate, and after that he mentioned our prophet. Then there will be a rightly guided caliphate following the prophetic model. This is the caliphate we are all waiting for. If we are currently living under oppressive rule, under tyrannical rule, I asked this question so we know exactly where we are today. Yes, and therefore we are waiting for the next stage, God willing, to be the stage of the caliphate following the prophetic model. Has anyone studied this topic? What does it mean? Of course, there is much disagreement on this topic, but the opinion I currently hold, the one I find most convincing, is that the hadiths about the signs of the hour, the tribulations, and the hadiths about the Mahdi and what will happen in them cannot be predicted in terms of time. Rather, they are among the signs of prophethood that are revealed when they occur. After they occur, we will know, but predicting them, I haven't found any research on this that would give my heart peace. So, now, what I mean to say is our golden age, therefore, its duration is 30 years, as we mentioned. So, if we are now talking about its importance, first, before I talk about its map, its importance is extremely significant because it provides a model for how Muslims govern themselves without a prophet and without revelation. Now, our prophet, the seal of the prophets, will die, meaning God will not send another messenger or reveal another revelation. Consequently, life and governance of Muslims are left to their own devices to manage their affairs. In light of revelation, in light of the Quran and Sunnah, without the presence of an infallible prophet, when the prophet was alive, for example, verses were revealed to him telling him what to do, or if he did something, they might be revealed because of his fatigue, or to guide him towards what is best. For example, we were confused about the prisoners of war at Badr, should we kill them or ransom them? Then revelation came down supporting one opinion over another. Now we went out to Uvad and listened to what people said, and it turned out that what they said was wrong. The conclusion we reached at Uvad was that perhaps it would have been better for us to remain in Medina. Then revelation came down saying, pardon them and ask forgiveness for them and consult with them in the matter. This means we should not break the consultation. So we had an infallible prophet and we had revelation, but when it ended the prophet and revelation, did Islam end or not? Islam did not end. The rightly guided caliphate following the prophetic methodology was a model period, especially in the political system, so that Muslims would know how to manage their affairs afterward. Therefore, the rightly guided caliphate is part of the religion, not just part of history. For this reason, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, adhere to my sunnah and the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs after me, cling to it firmly. Why did the rightly guided caliphs create a new religion? Did they add a new prayer, for example? Did they add a new zakat? Did they add a new form of worship? No, but the achievement or addition of the rightly guided caliphs to the lives of Muslims was their political contribution. Governance. That's why the Prophet called them the rule of the caliphs, meaning the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs. He spoke of them using the term caliphate, which is the political term. So, what is the difference between the life of the Prophet and the life of the rightly guided caliphs? Firstly, the Prophet is infallible, but the Caliph is not. I cannot contradict the Prophet and say to him, you made a mistake, or you were unjust, or you deviated from the truth, O Muhammad, may God forgive me. I cannot say that because the Prophet is infallible and because revelation comes to him from heaven. But Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, and therefore anyone who rules us after them, what can I say to him? No, by God, that is not our correct opinion, because he is a human being who makes mistakes and is correct at times, and he is isolated from revelation, and revelation will not come down to correct his actions. So, the opposition is the government. And how does the ruler deal with the opposition movement, whether it is a peaceful opposition movement or an armed opposition movement? Okay, when does the ruler's power over the ruled end? I mean now. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was everything. He was an imam, a ruler, a mufti, a judge, an educator, and a father. But Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and the rest of the rulers will not be all of these things together. So, when do I say, no, this is not your right, so and so, I don't know how to say that to the Prophet, but there must be a period in which Muslims, until the end of history, see how their political system was. This wouldn't work with the Prophet, but it would work with who is with the rightly guided caliphs, because they are people who strive to do what is right and wrong, and you can correct them, you can point out their mistakes, you can oppose them, and the ruler himself knows when to accept opposition and when not to, when to fight and when not to fight. Almost all political jurisprudence, Abu al-Harith, is the jurisprudence that the nation learned from the rightly guided caliphs. And here lies the importance. Yes, I mean, how do you choose the ruler? For example, no one chooses the prophet, you understand, but you choose the ruler. So, not appropriate for the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Yes, that a human being rules us. How does he deal with us? How do we deal with him? What are his rights? What are his duties? And so on. So this is the importance of the era of the rightly guided caliphate for Muslims when we talk about it. Is this a simple and easy topic? No, it is a very, very, very big topic. Absolutely, yes, because firstly, in our time, we face secular problems. Secularists tell you to separate religion from the state. They always say that religious states are full of fanaticism and oppression. They always have wars and bloodshed and force people to convert. So, countries that hold a religious ideology, someone might say that religious states have never succeeded, never achieved progress, and never established peace and security. The fact that we Muslims had a period called the rightly guided caliphate undermines the entire secular idea from the start. Here was a state that existed, ruled by religion, and enjoyed security, prosperity, and flourishing. It didn't force people to convert. You know, if it hadn't been for that period, we would be in a real mess because we wouldn't know how to implement Islam without a prophet. Even the fact that we know there was a period called the rightly guided caliphate following the prophetic model is significant. This is the best period in Islamic history. This corrects our thinking and our perception as Muslims of the nature of governance and the nature of people in the world. Let me give you a nice example. An Italian researcher named Maria Luisa Bernier has a very nice book published in the World of Knowledge series called The Ideal City Throughout History. What did she do? She compiled all the philosophers who wrote about or imagined an ideal city and compared their visions and how the ideal city developed over time. One of the most important conclusions she reached is that not a single ideal city that came to a philosopher's mind has been realized on Earth. So, imagine if I were to come and say that Islam is the solution, that Islam is the best for humanity, and that Islam establishes a flourishing civilization, and I don't have a period that constitutes a model period, then I would be relegated to the realm of ideal cities that have never been realized. These are just dreams. Stay close to the realm of dreams and visions. Yes, close to the realm of dreams. And the second nice thing is that the conceptions of the ideal city I preferred to stay with the philosophers. Deteriorating until it became more realistic. I mean, it started in imagination and dreams, and then the idealism within it kept diminishing until it reached a point where it became more realistic and more like, as Arli Izbegovic says, like a camp. I mean, Thomas More's city, for example, is more like a camp. Everything is organized. It's a city that has become inhumane. Look, the ideal city has turned into a camp, something inhumane. So, when we have a period called the Golden Age, it even corrects our perceptions of the nature of people. Yes, we have a period called the Golden Age, but that doesn't mean it has no problems. It doesn't mean it has no sins. It doesn't mean it has no trials. No, the best of humanity was when they ruled themselves. Yes, it's true, they achieved a great model of religion, piety, and fear. Yet there were sins, and there were trials, and there was fighting, but fighting surrounded by Islamic ethics, trials also surrounded by constants. In Islam, you find people fighting, but in the end, they pray behind one imam. They stop fighting to pray behind one imam. Therefore, the existence of a period we call the Golden Age or the Caliphate based on the prophetic methodology prevents us from being lost in dreams. We can't imagine that people will be angels, Even in the Golden Age, disagreements and problems can occur. This disagreement and these problems are what create reality. We're not dreaming about utopias and rosy dreams. After creating reality, it teaches us lessons on how to deal with problems. If the companions disagreed and fought, then surely people who aren't like the companions will have disagreements and fights. So, how do we fight? Do we destroy each other, wipe each other out, and sell each other's honor? Or do we look armed? You know, if it weren't for the era of the
كنت هتلاقي ممكن تلاقي حاكم من منطلق الدين والورع أول ما يسمع واحد يقول له اتق الله يروح قطع رقبته. ليه؟ علشان ده نذير شر. ما هو ده كده بداية شر وبداية انقسام
rightly guided caliphs. You might find a ruler driven by piety and religious devotion, who, upon hearing someone tell him to fear God, would immediately behead him because he sees it as a harbinger of evil. This, they might think, is the beginning of evil, the beginning of division, the beginning of strife. So, where does a ruler learn the rights of the ruled? Where, for example, when some people rebelled against Harley, he told them, you have 1, 2, or 3 rights with us, and he told them their rights, even while they were still alive. He told them their rights: we will not prevent you from prostrating to God, and we will give you from the spoils of war as long as you remain with us. Otherwise, we will not start fighting. And indeed, Ali did not initiate fighting against the Kharijites until they themselves began by attacking and killing Muslims like Abdullah ibn Karbab ibn al-Ard. I want to tell you that it is from these conflicts and problems that the Muslim community learned how to manage and govern its disputes. You know, if it weren't for the companions, if all of them had lived in a time of peace and harmony and people had fought after them, we were in a state of apostasy, unable to comprehend that a Muslim could fight another Muslim, or that a Muslim could disagree with another Muslim. Therefore, if someone were to ask us how we consider or classify the period of the Caliphate as a golden age, we would answer, of course, there were disagreements and conflicts. We would answer, so that we can learn exactly how to manage our relationships, so that this period becomes the model, the teacher from whom Muslims throughout history learn how to manage their disagreements, how to even manage their wars. So, I want to say that it is very beneficial to reflect on the period of the rightly guided caliphate. This corrects our perceptions and our ideas about people and humanity. It is also part of the religion because it is connected to the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. This is a very important aspect, and there are other matters that I won't elaborate on now. Yes, this is the importance. This is the importance of the rightly guided caliphate. Now, if we want to summarize what is good now, we said the period of the rightly guided caliphate was 30. The year began with our master Abu Bakr, may God be pleased with him. Our master Abu Bakr ruled for 2 years, a little over 2 years and a few months. Yes, exactly. 2 years and 2 months, meaning 3 months. What was the most important thing our master Abu Bakr did when he first assumed the caliphate? He had 2 major problems. The first problem was that he was now the first person to rule the Muslims without divine revelation. So, I want to say that you can consider our master Abu Bakr the founder of the science of Islamic political theory. Yes, indeed. His sermon, which he delivered at the beginning of his reign, is a summary of the science of Islamic political theory. Everything written in Islamic political theory is essentially an explanation of Abu Bakr's sermon. I have been appointed over you, and I am not the best among you. If I do well, then support me, and if I do wrong, then correct me. The strong among you is weak in my eyes until I secure his rights. The weak among you is strong in my eyes until I secure his rights. Obey me as long as I obey God and his messenger. If I disobey God and his messenger, then you owe me no obedience. Truthfulness is trustworthiness, and lying is treachery. Look at this short statement. This is the entire science of Islamic political theory. And for Muslims, it's just the very first principle. He put it to whoever worshipped Muhammad, then Muhammad has died. And whoever worshipped God, then God is alive and does not die. This is a very important principle. Yes, he said this when he faced the shock of the people. But pay attention. Look at even the phrase "I have been appointed over you, and I am not the best among you." This is a topic of jurisprudence, which means that no one has the right to assume leadership on his own authority, nor to say, "I am more deserving of it," or "I inherited it from the prophet," or "I inherited it from my father," or "a text came to me from heaven. I have been appointed over you, and I am not the best among you." This even Tadalib tribe, all of them came up with the idea that if Muhammad, through his prophethood, was able to unite the Arabs and become their leader, then they should be even more deserving. Therefore, when the model of prophethood succeeded, false prophets began to appear. Yes, the Ridder movement occurred, and it was a very dangerous movement. During the time of our master Abu Bakr, may God be pleased with him, our master Abu Bakr was able to end the Ridder wars against the apostates with the wars known as the Ridder Wars. Perhaps we will elaborate on them later. But now I am talking about a general overview. Yes, and after the end of the Ridder, Abu Bakr began the conquests. Look, the Arabs were a nation situated between two great nations, two global superpowers, namely Persia and Rome. Imagine Abu Bakr beginning to conquer both empires at the same time, and he died while 2 years and 3 months, and that's why Abu Bakr is considered the greatest ruler in history after the Prophet. Peace and blessings be upon him. There was also the dispatch of Uzarmir. Uzarmir's actions were beneficial. This was a small movement within the larger picture, the execution of Uzarmir's expedition. But why is Abu Bakr such a great person? Because he is the only person in history who took over a state with its capital threatened by invasion and left it as a global superpower in 2 years. That's astonishing. In 2 years, not 20. 2 years to take over a state with its capital threatened by invasion and leave it as a global superpower. Amazing. Something unprecedented. You are a historian with a history of your own. You know as any historian knows that if a king takes over a state when it is threatened and leaves it stable, that is considered a great thing, and he is considered one of the founders. If he takes over when it is stable and leaves it as a global superpower, that is also a great thing and is considered the golden age of the state. If he did this in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, or 50 years, he is still considered a great figure. You'll find that most great figures did this. It took them 20 or 30 years to reach their goals. But Abu Bakr took over the capital, which was threatened with invasion, and left the state as a global superpower in just 2 years. Abu Bakr is something else entirely. He's truly amazing. Then came Umar, who ruled for 10 years. Abu Bakr died in 13 and Umar ruled for 10 years and some months, because he succeeded Abu Bakr in Jumadar al-Akhir and was killed in Dhu al-Hajr of 23 May God have mercy on him. What are these 6 years? If we say that Umar took over the state as a global superpower, he left it as the sole global superpower. Abu Bakr established the Muslim nation as a superpower between Persia and Rome. During Umar's time, Persia was finished and Rome was weakened. It withdrew to Anatolia and almost all of North Africa, shrinking in on itself. And I forgot I'll say something important about Abu Bakr. During the Ridder Wars, a number of Quran memorizers died and were martyred. It was during Abu Bakr's time that the Quran was compiled. Therefore, the words of God Almighty, "Indeed, we have sent down the reminder and indeed, we will be its guardian, were embodied in Abu Bakr and the companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. The Quran existed, the companions had memorized it, but it was scattered in hearts and written down. So what did Abu Bakr do when he saw that a number of people had been martyred on the recommendation of Umar and some of the companions, especially the scribes of the revelation? Yes, those who had memorized and recited it. So he formed a committee to compile the Holy Quran, and they appointed Zayd ibn Thabit. Zayd ibn Thabit was a memorizer of the Quran, but what did he do? He took steps to document the Quran. He had memorized it himself, but he wouldn't write a verse in the Quran unless two conditions were met. He found it written down, and two companions who had memorized it testified to it. So he himself had memorized it, then he found it written down, and then two companions who had memorized it testified to it. Only then did he keep the religion of Islam eternal and preserved until now. Yes, and the two witnesses would have heard it from the messenger and memorized it. Yes, so this is how it was during the era of Abu Bakr. Then, during the reign of our master Umar, Islam spread, reaching almost to Khorasan, meaning the end of Persia. The Persian Empire fell, meaning the expansion of the conquests began. During his reign, the two great decisive battles took place: the Battle of Qadisir, in which the main Persian army was defeated, and the Battle of Yarmouk, in which the main Roman army was defeated. The Muslims then advanced to Antioch, meaning they went to Antioch and also advanced to Egypt and North Africa, to Tripoli and to what is now the end of Lydia, and they advanced eastward to the end of the Persian borders and the beginning of the Turkic peoples. So, when our master Umar conquered the lands, and the letters and the money increased, then here, our Master Umar established what we call the beginning, which is what is now called the state institutions, which are the diwans. He established a diwan for the Kharaj land tax, a diwan for the Arter stipends, and a diwan for the army, which is the Islamic State, expanded its population. So it wanted to organize the process of delivering rights to their rightful owners. Therefore, it began establishing bureaus or registers to keep records, and it started creating a historical record because now there are many letters coming and going. Also, new issues began to emerge, like the Persians. The Persians, for example, were a pagan people, meaning no specific rulings have been revealed for them. So, the rulings found in the Quran and Sunnah are those related to the people of the book, Jews and Christians, or to the pagan Arabs. But now we have fire worshippers. So he said, see the people of the book. So new events began to occur. Therefore, our master Umar is a man whose jurisprudence is so vastly documented. Why? Because the new issues, events, and questions that arose in his time were so numerous. And then, you see, professor of management, he's like a maestro of management. Yes, he's extraordinary. And speaking of maestro of management, that's a beautiful expression. By the way, it means that our master Umar, until the very last moment of his life, was innovating. He was already dead and going to die, so a new system for choosing the caliph after him. I mean, when our master Abu Bakr was dying, meaning he was near death and felt his end approaching, he consulted with the companions about who should be the caliph. He said, if you agree on him in my presence, it is better than disagreeing after I die. Of course, our master Abu Bakr had a high rank, and our master Umar had a high rank, and the rest of the companions came after them. The difference is clear: our master Abu Bakr, and after him, our master Umar. So they agreed on Umar. When he nominated him to them, he said, I have appointed Ibn al-Khattab as your caliph. So the companions accepted, and Umar took over. Our master Umar wanted to leave the nation in inheritance, a choice of rulers, instead of him choosing. What did he do? He said, I will place it among the 6 whom the messenger of God was pleased with at the time of his death. These 6 are the remaining 6 of the 10 promised paradise. but he excluded his cousin Said ibn Zayd from among them. He said, "It is enough for the family of Umar that one of them should take over. If it is good, then we have benefited from it, and if it is bad, then it is enough for the family of Umar that one of them bears this evil on their behalf." He refused to be included in the shura. Neither his son Abdullah ibn Umar, who was worthy of the caliphate, nor his cousin Said ibn Zayd, who was one of the 10 promised paradise and who died from the 10 promised paradise, our master Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, in the plague of Amors, nor the 6 who were sitting with us now, said that these 6 should agree and choose from among themselves. This is considered the people of authority and decision-making, and then the nation would accept or reject this choice. So, even our master Umar, even as he died, was planning a new administration. Of course, there were other issues, such as the confiscation of the lands of Sawad and others. But in summary, we can say that if our master Abu Bakr had a unique legacy that no one in history has had, he was a man who took over the country in 2 years and transformed it from... Yes, that's possible then, but to be a conqueror and just, that's our master Omar, no one else. And merciful, yes, wow, these 3 qualities have an unnatural contradiction. If we wanted to give our master Omar a title, it would be justice, strength, and mercy. Yes, and these were not known in the histories of other empires. In other empires, when the state is stable, there might be justice, but when the state is expanding and fighting, you ask me how to be fair to the conquered, subjugated, or defeated peoples. That doesn't exist. I mean, look at America now as it expands, and from the beginning of history, I mean, anyone, I mean, there are many examples, I mean, Napoleon, Cyrus, Genghis Khan, I mean, these people who expanded. No one was just among them. So, after that, we said that our master Omar ruled for years and months, and this is the summary of his reign. After that comes our master Uthman ibn Affan. May God be pleased with him. Our master Uthman ibn Affan, the 3rd man in virtue and status in Islam. Our master Uthman continued the conquests after our master Umar. With our master Uthman, we reached Afghanistan, Khorasan. Khorasan is the region that was called Khorasan, which is now Iran and Afghanistan. It is the northeastern part of Iran and the southwestern part of Afghanistan. This region extended beyond Tunisia to Nubia in Sudan, between Egypt and Sudan, and to the Caucasus, the lands of the Caucasus, Dardistan and Chechnya. These are the conquests that the era of our master Uthman added. These conquests, of course, were not with the same fervor as our master Umar, but keep in mind that the Islamic effort was exhausted. Uthman's era was one of prosperity and flourishing. Therefore, our master Al-Hassan al-Basri was present in Medina at that time. He was still a teenager, and he said, "I remember no day from the days of Uthman, except that he would call out to the people, 'Gather your money.' Every day there was money coming. Every day there were gifts coming. Every day there was money. Flowing is praiseworthy. So, this era of prosperity and flourishing was the era of our master Uthman. May God be pleased with him. His greatest achievement was uniting the nation on one Quran. Now, we said that our master Abu Bakr's achievement regarding the Quran was that he compiled the scattered Quran, which was in people's hearts and written down into one book. When the conquests expanded, some of the companions went to fight. For example, our master Abdullah ibn Umar was in Medina, but he was among the polytheists during the conquest of Azerbaijan, and he was also among the polytheists during the conquest of Tunisia. So, the companions were working from the far east to the far west. Some of them heard that people differed in their recitation of the Quran. Now, the Quran exists, but dialects sometimes overshadowed certain words. Overshadowed, meaning that a word was no longer pronounced correctly. or some people wrote their own interpretations in the margins of the Quran. So, this is when people began to differ in their recitation of the Quran, and disputes arose among them over which recitation was correct. When this reached our master Uthman, may God be pleased with him, it was said to him, O Commander of the Faithful, be vigilant, let the hearts of the Muslims not differ, nor their scriptures differ, lest we experience what happened to the people of the book, the differences between their holy books. So, our master Uthman ordered the collection of copies of the Quran and had copies made from the original manuscript, which had been compiled by our master Abu Bakr. He had copies made and distributed them to the various regions so that all other copies could be compared to it. Those that conformed were kept, and those that did not were burned. This was to prevent people from differing in their recitation of the Quran and to ensure that nothing was introduced into it, not a word, not a melody, not a form, not an interpretation that someone might write in the margins, and so on. This is also a very great achievement of our master Uthman. May God be pleased with him. Now, as is well known and witnessed, and as we were discussing earlier, the era of the rightly guided caliph, affairs during a time of strength, it also taught us how to deal with trials and tribulations. During the era of our master Uthman, the trials began. How did they begin? In short, and perhaps we'll elaborate further later. Pay attention here. In what year did Uthman assume leadership? 23 R. So, someone born on the day of the Prophet's death, peace be upon him, would have been 23 years old during Uthman's era. This refers to someone born on the day of the Prophet's death, someone who did ent live during the Prophet's time. And then, after a while, we had children whose mothers were Persian, Roman, or Coptic, whether from the conquered lands or from those who had converted to Islam from those lands. So now there's a generation whose father is Arab and whose mother is Persian, Roman, Coptic, or Kurdish. This is where a change began in the generation and a change in culture. The culture wasn't purely Arab anymore. The Arabs spread out, and then a change even began in people's hearts and minds. Now, the generation of the older companions is passing away, and the generation that was once the younger companions is now older, and the generation of the successors, tabi'in, is taking over. So, with an influx of wealth and increased prosperity, some people, especially those who had recently converted or those who hadn't yet fully embraced Islam, were affected. Faith in their hearts was tempered by some competition for money, and a kind of intellectual corruption began to infiltrate the Muslim community. Conspiracies arose, and these conspiracies manifested themselves. For example, a spiteful individual, acting alone, stabbed Umar ibn al-Khattab, killing him. Then, another spiteful individual, along with Habash, began to act individually, then collectively, like Abdullah ibn Sarbar. This is where Abdullah ibn Sarbar's organization began to create sedition. This sedition found fertile ground among those who were beginning to show worldly desires and ambitions. Some who felt they hadn't received their due or their rightful place joined in. In the midst of social changes, this conspiratorial mindset took hold. This led to a revolution, rumors, and then a rebellion against Uthman, may God be pleased with him, which ended with his assassination. After Uthman, the fourth man in rank and merit, Ali, may God be pleased with him, assumed leadership through the Pledge of Allegiance from the Muhajirin and Ansar. His appointment was almost like an agreement among the companions and the followers, who were the people of authority and influence at that time. But Ali was now in front of him. We can say that our master Ali was a master of the nation in the jurisprudence of trials and tribulations, in dealing with rebels and how to deal with peaceful opposition, armed opposition, those who fought him based on misinterpretation, or those who went astray. He dealt with extremists who went to extremes in their veneration of him, even to the point of declaring him an infidel. All of this happened during the time of our master Ali. So, our master Ali was the master and jurist of the nation in times of strife, times of weakness and times of fear. Therefore, God preserved him because our Master Ali was an imam in knowledge and an imam in war. He was a master in the most difficult situations a nation or ruler could face. Yes, that's right. And the nation took its jurisprudence in dealing with opponents from Ali ibn Abi Talib, may God be pleased with him. Look, our Master Ali fought companions who rebelled against him based on misinterpretation, and he fought companions whose conflicts escalated into a war they didn't want. He fought a group who declared him an infidel, and he fought a group who denounced him, or he killed a group who denounced him. So, our Master Ali, during this period,
نأخذ من حروبه فيها كيف يتعامل المسلمون وكيف يتعامل النظام السياسي الإسلامي مع المعارضين وأنواع المعارضين، إيه حقوق المعارضين على الحاكم، إيه حقوق الحاكم على
This is a very important period. We learn from its battles how Muslims dealt with the Muslim community, how the Islamic political system dealt with opponents, the types of opponents, the rights of opponents over the ruler, the rights of the ruler over opponents, and so on. This, in general, is the period of the rightly guided caliphate. All the stages of the Muslim strife, weakness, and decline. Towards the end of Uthman's era and during the era of Ali ibn Abi Talib, therefore, the period of the rightly guided caliphate is a period that can serve as a model for the Muslim community in all its stages, whether it is strong or weak. This is the importance of the period of the rightly guided caliphate, and this is a summary of its events. The rightly guided caliphs, Professor Muhammad, and the fifth question is very interesting. There was disagreement among scholars. Regarding this, we said Abu Bakr ruled for 2 years and 3 months, Umar for 10 years and a few months, Uthman for 12 years, and Ali for 5 years minus a few months. That leaves us with 6 months. They are the ones who follow Al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, so that we can complete the 30 years. Some scholars mentioned that there were 4 caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. Why didn't Al-Hasan ibn Ali have a saying? I'll get to that now. Some scholars said no. The text we have states that the caliphate will be after 30 years, so the period of Al-Hasan ibn Ali must be included. Those who said there were 5 relied on the prophetic text, and those who said there were 4 relied on the fact that the prophetic text did not mean a limit, but rather a general rule, because the 6-month period of Al-Hasan ibn Ali did not have many events. We want to emulate the rightly guided caliphs so that we can learn from them. So Al-Hasan's period did not have many events. It was only 6 months, and very little is narrated about him during that time. Therefore, their argument was that he did not do anything that could be emulated, so that he would be included with the rightly guided caliphs they have. There is much jurisprudence, but it was a period. However, whether we say 4 or 5, the issue of Al-Hasan ibn Ali's caliphate presents a slight problem. Our Master Ali, may God be pleased with him, had transferred his rule, or rather his authority in the capital, from Medina to Kufa. So, the pledge of allegiance to our Master Al-Hasan ibn Ali took place in Kufa. Scholars differed on whether this pledge, which took place in Kufa, was a legitimate and valid pledge like the one that took place in Medina, the stronghold of the companions and the successors. Those who considered it a legitimate pledge included Al-Hasan ibn Ali. Those who considered it not a legitimate pledge argued that the entire Muslim community had not yet accepted it, and it had not yet taken place in Medina. Therefore, we cannot be certain that those who pledged allegiance were the majority of the companions and the successors. They considered it a transitional period, meaning it did not fall under the rightly guided caliphate. Yes, that's all. However, what is established regarding the virtue of our Master Al-Hasan ibn Ali, may God be pleased with him, is the saying of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that this son of mine is a leader, and that God will use him to reconcile 2 factions. two great figures from among the Muslims, and this hadith is a great hadith. The companions and scholars rejoiced in it for more than one reason, the most important of which is proving the virtue of al-Hasan ibn Ali, may God be pleased with him, and proving that neither of the two warring factions of Muslims had committed disbelief. Neither of them had been described by the verse as being corrupt or described in a way that contradicts Islam. Isn't al-Hasan ibn Ali's act of abdicating the caliphate enough for us to consider him one of the rightly guided caliphs? The idea of his abdication and closing the door to sedition and what the nation was exposed to. This door was opened with the death of our master Umar and closed with al-Hasan's abdication to Muawiyah. This alone is an achievement. I mean, if he hadn't done anything else, it's not enough. But be aware that knowledge is one thing, and the verse and the interpretations are another. You say this is a great virtue, no doubt about it. But that this virtue includes him among the rightly guided caliphs, no. This is knowledge. The most likely scenario is whether he is considered one of the caliphs or not. I don't know. This is one of the issues which didn't give a definitive opinion, honestly. Okay, looking at the evidence of both sides and their actions, what does that mean? Of course, the first is to follow the text, and the text means 30 years. But you also go back and look at time is running out, so let me close this episode. So a small branch, okay, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, passed away and didn't leave us a form of government, right? Okay, agreed. This is what's called a caliph. So, in order to call him a caliph, what are the conditions? Suppose someone comes out today and says, my dear, don't you want people to have a consultation and so on, and choose, and if they choose me, I'll be called a caliph or commander of the faithful. For example, suppose someone comes out today and takes over a country or whatever and says, the people have chosen me, my name is commander of the faithful, and let's expand and grow. How do we consider this person a caliph? When do we consider him a caliph? Okay, the word caliph has its linguistic origin, is the man or thing that succeeds something else, meaning the chronological succession. So-and-so succeeded so-and-so, and he is his successor. Okay, but what does this linguistic term mean when we bring it into the legal sphere to determine who is the legitimate caliph and who is the illegitimate caliph? The fundamental criterion is that this caliph must rule according to Islamic law. This is the basic criterion, the consistent one. In books of Islamic political jurisprudence, they say caliphate or imamate. The imamate is the position of the emir. The imamate is the succession to prophethood. The succession to prophethood means following the path of prophethood. Or the caliphate means that succeeding the prophet is the succession to prophethood in safeguarding the religion and governing the world according to it. This is the legal description of the caliphate. Now, for example, a discussion arose among scholars after the rightly guided caliphs, who were 4 or 5 Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and so on. Is it permissible to call the rest of the people caliphs? Is it permissible to call Muawiyah, Yazid ibn Muawiyah, Sulayman the Magnificent, and Abu Ja'far al-Mansur? Is it permissible to call these countries caliphs or not? A majority of scholars agree that it is permissible to call them caliphs in the linguistic sense, not in the legal sense or in the sense of the rightly guided caliphate. Calling them caliphs is not the same as calling them the rightly guided caliphs. Ibn Taymiyyah has a subtle argument here, based on a hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that there will be caliphs, and they will be numerous. This is the Prophet's statement. Ibn Taymiyyah said, the Prophet said they will be numerous, and he called them caliphs. We know that the rightly guided caliphs were not numerous. Therefore, this verse explicitly permits calling these caliphs.
أغلب المسلمين يعني ما ينفعش كل واحد تأمر على 100 ولا 200 ولا 1000 ولا 2000
Caliphs. However, caliphate implies a general leadership to which the majority of Muslims submit or accept. It is not permissible for anyone who commands 100, 200, 1000, 2,000 or even 10,000 people to declare himself Caliph of the Muslims and demand allegiance from the rest of the Muslims, as happened, for example, with the Islamic State in 2014. The Caliphate is a general leadership, meaning it includes the majority of Muslims, at least. Moreover, of course, what does it mean? It means that someone chooses it in circumstances of weakness like those we have seen. This is the answer. The Caliphate is the succession to prophethood. That is why Abu Bakr was called the successor of the Messenger of God. When Umar came, they continued to call him the successor of the Messenger of God. When this became too much for him, the title Commander of the Faithful came. So, what is the meaning of the Caliphate? God willing. Okay, Professor Muhammad, the summary I want from you is just one line that expresses the importance. The importance, that is, it may be one of the most important things we mentioned in answering this question. The rightly guided Caliphate is part of the religion and part of the history of Muslims. It is the golden age in the history of Muslims, and it is the exemplary era from which Muslims learn how to manage their affairs without the presence of the Prophet and after the cessation of revelation. Yes, may God reward you, Professor Muhammad. So, we stopped now at question 31. Question 32 is one of the most important questions, which of course has been the subject of much discussion, opinions, and viewpoints, etc. We will address leaders, scholars, secrets, governance, politics, wars, and battles. All you have to do is follow our YouTube channel. Our history stretches from the farthest point in the past to the farthest point in the future. We bring history to life.